I'm excited to introduce one of our most distinguished cougars, and we get to call, there's a lot of institutions that like to claim Dr. Turner, but she got her Master's of Education here in in our very first cohort, and for our Master's in Education. And so it's an honor to have you come back here. How many of you know Dr. Turner? Someone who does not really need an introduction here, because when I said Dr. Turner's coming, I heard people say, oh my gosh, these are some of the words that I heard. She's so inspirational. Oh, she's a visionary. Oh, she's an innovator. She's a connector. She's such an authentic leader. These are words that came when I said, Dr. Turner's coming for lunch. And Dr. Turner's all of those things. But what I've had the opportunity to experience only in the last about 2.5, 3 years, when Sarah McNeil introduced me to Dr. Turner, was that she's really a risk taker. And to me, we've talked a lot about today is how are we going to revolutionize health science education? We're going to have to take more risks. And you shared with me a story once about this identity shift that you had to change when you said that I am a medical educator, right? And you've put a career and a passion around that, and taking this risk and really saying, this is a different identity. Not I'm losing an identity, but I'm adding to my identity. And it was such a risk that she shared with me, and I thought it was such an authentic way of sharing it, because she's now shared and helped other people go into this risky business of health science education or medical education. And it is a risky business because we're really tapped to lead change for the next generation. And so it's so exciting to have you here. So those of you who don't know Dr. Turner, she's a tenured professor of pediatrics at Baylor College of Medicine, where she serves as the Vice Chair of Educational Affairs and the Associate Director of House Staff Education. And she's director of their CRIS Center, which is the Center for Research, Innovation, and Scholarship in Medical Education. So someone who doesn't need an introduction, but it's just an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us.
So let me share kudos first, or thanks. So Tom, thank you for being the lighthouse to Sarah, because Sarah was a lighthouse to me. And what this is it's about how we can pay it forward, how we can give back to our community. And second of all, I also want to recognize Satid Tamasadabun, and I said it right, because he is the director of the Center for Research, Innovation, and Scholarship. One of my philosophies is build it and give it to someone, so that they can take it and run and build it and grow it far better than I could ever do it. So today we're going to talk about one of the most important topics. So I'm a pediatrician. That's how I started in life. Although I think my parents keep asking, or my family has asked me, I thought you went to medical school and you say you're a teacher? Why did we spend all that money to have you go to medical school? So I oftentimes get asked, what do you do in your job? One of the things, and to me what I really like to do, whether it's with my pediatric patients, with my mentees, or the people that I work with, is if I leave this earth and someone can say that I was the wind beneath their wings, that's the most important thing that I can do. So this talk is about how to support you. It's how to help you have that wind beneath your wings and make you successful. And we're going to start with a story. So here's a brand new faculty member. Just got hired on. She's eager, she's energetic, she's gotten her master's in education, and she's ready to tackle the world. She gets asked, I know you went to school and got your master's, could you help me on this curriculum? Oh, could you help me with this project? Could you, I hear that you know how to do qualitative research. Could you do my interviews for me? Could you help me on this task? I need you to, would you be willing to volunteer one of the medical or mentor one of the medical students? Would you be willing to help out on this task force? Would you be willing to take on redesigning the curriculum? Would you be willing to? And after about 5 years, she's having the time of her life. She loves what she does. She's a top educator. And she feels like she's very valued because she loves what she's doing and she's giving back to her job. She has a meeting with her boss. She's at an academic center. And one of the things is her boss meets with her and says, "What have you accomplished?" She says, "I've done a lot of things. I've worked really, really hard." And her boss says, "But what have you accomplished as far as scholarship towards your promotion, giving back to the field?" And her boss and her mentor says, "If you don't know where you're going, you might not get there." Now, the other moral of this story is if you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. And that's a part of it. So she all of a sudden is now feeling very disappointed. She's feeling like, what have I done for those 5 years? So this was me. I started at my job. I loved what I did. I loved teaching. I was doing a lot of hard work. And my boss says, "I'm here to help you succeed, Teri. But you're being very selfish." I was like, oh my gosh, that's me on the wheel. What do you mean I'm being selfish? I'm giving back. I'm giving and giving and giving to this university. And she goes, "But you're not sharing your gift with the field. You're not taking your innovative ideas and letting others build upon them. You're not sharing all of those tools that you're doing in your work or those curricula so that others can benefit from that work." Well, needless to say, after that meeting, this is what I felt like. I was kind of lost. And I honestly felt like I had been kicked in the behind by the organization that I left. You know, so when you look at personal effectiveness, it's really two things. It's that hard work. Hard work is essential and it's a core, but it's got to be hard work towards a goal, and that goal has to align with the values of the institution and those beliefs. And I also want to take you to this thought of that connotative, that what will take us from just doing hard work and those values and align those so we can be personally effective. Now, the good news of this story is it has a great ending. So my mentor said, "Well, Teri, you're already doing 80% of the work. If you think about this, if you just tweaked it a little bit, what could you do to make something scholarly?" So one of the things that I like to think about it is, how do I grow as an individual? And I'll tell you that wasn't a good meeting. It didn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy. I didn't come out of it going, yeah, I'm going to do scholarship. It took me a while. I had to reflect. I had to think back. But I said, you know, you can keep doing what you're doing and get the same results, which is insanity. Or you can choose and do it a different way. And maybe she's right. maybe there are ways that I can do that. So let's take for stage 2. So we're sitting in a room, and I did faculty development. I still do faculty development. It was what I did early in my career. I love faculty development, something I'm very passionate about. And we're sitting there in a room, and we're talking about, oh, we need to do faculty development for all of our teachers. We need to do it so that we can meet regulations. And as we're listing the topics for what we need to do for faculty development, lecturing, small group teaching, role modeling, etc., someone in our group said, boy, that would make a great book. Like, book, I've never written a book. I've never published. So that started out with, we're doing it anyway. We've got to do faculty development. We tend to write out our scripts for what we're teaching. At least we've got a draft. Why don't we turn that into a book? So it is the Clinician Educator's Handbook. We said, well, maybe someone will give us some money for this. We wrote and got a grant. It was a small grant to pay for the publishing of this book, the distribution of this book. We decided that when we wrote this book and we were going to distribute it to individuals at different institutions, that we would put a little survey in the envelope that had the book and said, would you please fill this out? It had 6 questions on it. We got over a 60% response rate on that survey, and we turned that into a paper called Value Placed on Formal Training in Education by pediatric department chairs and residency program directors. Well, we decided, we're doctors. That book is really big. We wear coats with pockets, but it didn't fit in them. And how could we, people are not going over and going, where's that book? Let me see if I can find it. So we decided to do what's called an educational code card. We use these job aids when we do resuscitations in the hospital. We can't memorize everything, so these are really job aids to help us remember, and that's the white card that you have on your table. It also has a link to the book as well. It lists the address because we really want it to be open access so that people would be able to get to it. We decided that, well, let's put it into what's called a warehouse that takes curricula, tools that you use for teaching. And in our world in health education, it's called MedEd Portal. We actually placed it in 2 warehouses. We put it in a pediatric shareable warehouse, and then we sent it to MedEd Portal. When it got to MedEd Portal and got reviewed, it got featured for 1 month as one of the most useful tools that MedEd Portal had. And because of that, we got contacted by the editors of Clinical Teaching and said, would you please write an article for us on transforming teaching into scholarship? Someone read that article and said, would you please do a podcast for us on transforming teaching into scholarship? Then from that, the authors on this book, we got an award at our local institution for enduring educational materials. And on top of that, it just keeps on giving, and scholarship's a gift. And I hope what you see is it just keeps moving forward. And so now we're going to have a MOOC off of one of the topics in there on instructional design. So what I'm hoping you see is that you've done 80% of the work. It takes just a little bit more, a small amount, to transform that into scholarship. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. You know, ultimately, there was promotion. But for me, that's not what I did it for. For me, what was most important is I grew as an individual and as an educator. Because of that growth, I was able to give back and support others in their growth as educators. And probably what made the biggest difference for me is it helped move the field forward. So when I've had colleagues from Tibet, from Mexico, and they said, thank you so much for making this an open access book because we couldn't afford it otherwise. And now this allows us to do faculty development in a resource limited area. That's why we do this. We do it also to change policy. I will tell you that in pediatrics, if you're an educational leader, you're going to have an advanced degree because it's something that has evolved from the work that we have done. So what this is it's really about what are you passionate about? What are you good at? And do a lot. I did a lot of faculty development. And what does the field need and what others want to hear about? And that's your sweet spot. And that's what we want you to find is that sweet spot. So what I'm going to do is at your tables, talk about what you're passionate about. Maybe what you're good at and you do a lot of. What you might think the field needs from the work that you do. So just spend a couple of minutes discussing at your table what you're passionate about. All right, I think we'll come back together. And you're going to have more time also to talk about what those passions are and how you can turn them into scholarship. You know, this is, when I think about in my own career, the times that came up with the greatest ideas were around food and beverage. It was in these casual conversations that we had. It's about connecting with people that you don't know or may have just met, but have similar interests to you. And then you begin collaborating with those individuals. Because that's a part of, to me, what scholarship is about. It's about those connections. It's also what makes it fun. It is those social networking and getting to know different people. So now you get to this point of you've got that hard work and you know the value. And we're going to talk about value and what academic institutions value. They value scholarship. That's an elusive word, and I do want to tell Tom, I don't know that I've ever published anything that's a randomized controlled trial. I have had no significant differences, though. But again, what has been so lovely is that the definition of scholarship has been greatly expanded. So I work in the field of medicine. I started out as a health outcomes researcher. I looked at access to healthcare services, but it really wasn't my passion. I enjoyed doing that. I know how to do randomized controlled trials, but what my passion is making a difference and looking at the work that we do and seeing how we can do it better. So as a part of this, Ernest Boyer really looked at scholarship and redefined how we see it. It's not just the randomized controlled trials. My very first paper was, what is a clinical pearl? How many of you all have heard the term clinical pearl? Raise your hands. It's something, we throw out clinical pearls when we teach, and what we found out is really there wasn't anything about it. That first paper was more about our opinions and experiences. It was research in action. It wasn't a randomized controlled trial. And again, it has stretched our promotion and tenure committees to think about how we look at scholarship and look at it differently. The scholarship of application, the scholarship of teaching, the scholarship of integration, along with the scholarship of discovery. And Glassex's criteria is another thing that probably many of you are aware of that helps form that framework to the scholarship. But to me, it's around three core principles. If you got these, it's public, it's peer-reviewed, and it's a platform for others to build on. Public, peer-reviewed, and a platform. Because this is going to get more into that digital scholarship. It's not going to, today's scholarship looks a whole lot different than it did several years ago. The other thing is you're already doing the work. How can we help you make that work count twice? Just like what I talked about with the story, with the book, how can we help make that work count twice? So as a part of this talk, it was called Transforming Your Teaching, Your Work, Your Leadership Activities. And when you think about transformation, one of the best analogies is that of a caterpillar going into a butterfly. Now, one, this doesn't happen overnight. Two, there's a big change between that caterpillar and the butterfly. And three, I'm not a butterfly, but I can't imagine that transformation doesn't hurt because you're changing structures, you're growing wings. It's not easy. And instead of the word transformation, I'd like to call it a metamorphosis. Because if you do focus on that scholarship, it changes you. It changes who you are, what you do, what you believe in, how you look at work, and the purpose of that. So this is that metamorphosis. Now, it's been described in three stages, and I like this one because it's clean cut. It's clearly described what, where, when, and how you do. What are the things that you do as an educator? Then looking in phase 2, taking a scholarly approach. So what do we already know from the field? What's in the literature? Are there any conceptual frameworks out there that can help inform? What other work has been done in this particular area? And then how do we share our findings? It doesn't necessarily say publish our findings. It says how do we share and disseminate public, peer-reviewed platform. And the first, okay, this is Valentine's Day. So I want you to love the literature because this is where we take away and can learn from. And I don't want you just to think about the traditional papers that have written. MedEd Portal has a lot of material in there. So if you're developing a new curriculum, that's the first place I go to. And in fact, this talk was informed. There's 4 different workshops on transforming your teaching into scholarship in MedEd Portal. So I don't have to create from the ground up. I can look to see what's already been done. Plus, if you want a good handout on conceptual frameworks, there's one in MedEd Portal in one of those workshops. Another good place to get conceptual frameworks is a book called Researching Medical Education, because what I find is young educators who haven't been in the field a lot may not know what conceptual framework do I use? Where do I find those? Another friend that I want you to find is Google Scholar, which I'm sure my institution is looking down on me at this point in time and saying, what are you doing, Teri? But PubMed just doesn't have the breadth of the materials that helps us move the field forward. I am a better educator because I read the business literature, because I take the literature from psychology and add that to the things that I do. And for me as a medical educator, I love higher education because many things have already been done. One of the first papers that we did was on doing concept maps. Concept maps is what you do in kindergarten and in grade school, but you can take that same concept and apply it to medical education. I'm passionate about growth mindset. That comes out of the psychological literature, desirable difficulty, Brené Brown, and being that vulnerable leader, ultra learning. So that's one of the newer things that I am interested in, and I would not have learned about it if I hadn't Googled it. All right, another good person that if you don't know any other woman today or you don't have a Valentine, please make Jane your Valentine. Jane is such a wonderful friend. So Jane stands for Journal Author Name Estimator. Although I didn't realize up behind her name, it looks like that's Jane from Tarzan. I had never noticed that, but I do really like Jane. And what this is a website where you can put either your abstract into it, you can put terms, and you can find out what has been published on the topic and or who is publishing in that field, what journals would maybe take the work that you're interested in. So she is a wonderful person to become a good friend with, so let her be your Valentine today. And it's not just randomized controlled trials that get published. Innovations, as Tom talked about, this design research is about innovations and what we're finding at the front lines and how that makes a difference for us. So something that we did was the creation of a system for residents who are very interested in being teachers. So we created an Academy of Distinguished Resident Educators. It's a 750-word piece, but again, it helps get that out so others can build upon it. And you can see these are some journals and some titles of places that take these innovations. Another place that I love publishing in is 12 Tips. Tom's done a 12 Tips on design research, so everybody should check that out. It's a great way. It's not, I did research on. but it's using the literature to inform and build upon it. We've talked a little bit about MedEd Portal or other repositories. If there's any people who like to take pictures, there is a repository for clinical images. So there are a lot of different places. Your scholarship doesn't just have to be grants and papers. The other thing I want to talk to you about is online open access journals. So as a clinician, health services researcher, I grew up in a field and was told, don't publish in open access. They're not rigorous, they're not good, and they charge you. But open access is the future because we want people to be able to build upon our work. And actually, open access is very good. We've got two that are great, BMC, Medical Education, and Medical Education Online. We published on that, and in fact, two of our papers got the top articles for the year, and they were published in that open access because people could read them and build upon them. They do have a small fee that's associated with when you publish. I shouldn't say the word small. The fee is about $1,800 to $1,900, but it's only if it's been peer-reviewed and found to be published. You can also think about things like point of view. So I once gave a talk with a good friend of mine who was in the first graduating class, and we talked about having entrustable professional activities for teachers. And in the audience happened to be the man who came up with the whole concept of entrustable professional activities. And he goes, this is intriguing. I've never thought of it like that. And we turned to him and said, well, would you like to write a paper on this? And we wrote a point of view about wouldn't it be important to have entrustable professional activities for teachers as well. And lastly, I want to talk about one other place that you may not have heard about. This is called Amy MedEd Publish. This is an open access journal that's continuously published. It has high ethical standards, but it is a post-peer review post-peer review. So in other words, you submit your article. The editors look at it to make sure that it is an ethically sound and good paper. And then it goes out, just like Amazon.com, anything out there. And the people who read your article vote on it and give it stars. So if it gets 4 to 5 stars after a period of time, they'll consider publishing that into PubMed. So another great place to think about, because what's better? Your paper, your innovation, your great ideas sitting in your closet, in your desk, in your drawers, or getting it out there so that others can read it and build upon it. So when you look at this three-phase model, I'm going to give you one example. So in pediatrics each year, we interview a new class of residents. These are trainees that want to be pediatricians. They're already doctors. We have 1,600 applications for 34 positions. That's a lot of reading to do, to come up with who we're going to invite. And they have what's called letters of recommendation. Each student has approximately 5 letters of recommendation. That's a lot to read. And I decided I got tired of reading. I do this a lot. Why am I having to read all of these? We did a little experiment to see if a nurse educator could read them and score them exactly the same that I could. Guess what? I don't read letters of recommendation anymore. So that saved me hours of time. Then I was going, well, do they even make a difference? Here she's reading them, so no, I don't have to read them anymore, but do they make a difference? So what we did, and how do we ground it in the literature, was we used a scoring rubric that had been previously used in the literature, and we took that and built our study upon that. And then we looked at outcomes, and what we found is letters of recommendation don't have anything to do with performance of those individuals. So again, then we got out and shared those findings to the field, And we're working on that policy change because that's what it's about. It's about how do we make a difference. So now what I want you to do is go back into your groups because it all starts with an idea. Tom said this. It all starts with an idea. So I want you to think about something that you guys talked about, something you were passionate about, something you do a lot, and think about how you might turn that into scholarship. Where might you disseminate it? Could you write a 12 tips? Could you write up an innovation? Could you give a workshop on it for other people to enjoy? Might you put your curriculum into MedEd Portal? So I'm going to give you another 5 minutes to discuss at your tables, thinking about where you might take that idea and make it into scholarship. All right, we're going to get you to come together, wrap up those conversations. All right, let's hear about some of those things that you've talked about in your group. So how about someone from this side of the room? What was something that you all talked about or something that you might transform or turn into scholarship? Jonathan, you're getting volunteered. I can see it.
We were both talking about a shared interest in the learner in education. We kind of talked about how an idea is, I think the accreditation bodies have core competencies and milestones. And I think it's sometimes there's a huge distance between the clinical faculty in the field and the learners in the field, and these kind of goals for using these tools. And just wondering about if we did a better job teaching the learners and the faculty this like shared level of progression and growth.
So perhaps that's an EPA in remediation or growth. Actually, I like growth much better than I like remediation. This was around, and again, I want you to know that scholarship is connections. It's finding people with similar passions that you have and riffing off of each other. And again, that's where some of these greatest ideas, you guys had one as well.
Well, you mentioned something about photo repository, and that's something that I've been kind of playing around with for a few months because I work in a surgical pathology lab, and what I do is based on what I see. And so I notice that like my residents and PA students, they don't know what they're looking at. So if I get a chance, I'll take de-identified pictures of textbook cases of whatever I'm looking at. So recently I started on Instagram to make those pictures available to my students, and because I didn't like make it private, it's grown to just a small following of like 900 people.
Just a small following of 900 people.
Email me and we'll talk about
Yeah.
it, and I thought maybe, you know, with you talking about this repository could turn into something real.
It actually already has.
Oh.
So this is another thing. So Instagram, your promotions committee may go, what the heck? We don't do Instagram, but it's public, it's being peer reviewed, and it's a platform. Think about how many people you're impacting and how important, again, that is. And that's what we're talking about with scholarship. And sometimes one of the hardest things, or at least the hardest thing for me, is the connotative. So that, how do I can work really hard, but sometimes I may be working on the wrong things. So there's a story that probably many of you have heard about looking at filling a jar with different things. And there's rocks, sands, and sand and pebbles. And it all depends on how you put them in there. So if you think about rocks, or those are your most important things. Those are your big things that you want to accomplish. I think about the sand as the work I do on an everyday basis. It's just got to get done. So that may be seeing patients. That may be doing my charts, etc. And the pebbles are like a pebble in your shoe. For me, that happens to be email. So it may not get done. My second pebble is meetings. I have a lot of those, and do I really need to be there the whole hour? Because they fill up your day. So when you look at them, this is the same amount, except there's a few less pebbles. So if you look at these two pictures, if you wait until the end to try to get your most important tasks, they don't get done. The sand and the pebbles can take all of the time that you have, and in my case, I call those the unnecessary fires that happen and come up all the time. So thinking about how do we make time for scholarship, and I love this quote, is anything less than a conscious commitment to the important, those are those big rocks, is an unconscious commitment to the pebbles. So when you think about that, think about what should be on your to-do list. What should you tackle first? And we talk about the 3 most important things. I'm relabeling that and think about the most productive things. What will help and contribute to your scholarship? I started with what was called the Pomodoro technique because my attention span is about 15 minutes. It's hard for me to concentrate. And for me to sit down and have to work and do scholarship was a little harder for me at the beginning. So a Pomodoro technique is you set a timer for 25 minutes and you work on something for 25 minutes. It is great for procrastination. It is great for just getting stuff done because you go, I can do anything for 25 minutes. And a Pomodoro is you do 25 minutes and then 5 minutes, you take a break, and then you do another, you do 4 of those, and then after 4, you take a little bit longer break. And actually the science has told us that we actually need breaks. We are more creative if we have breaks. I've now gotten to a point that I can just power through. But what I notice happening is after about 2 hours, that creativity drops. And it's really important that we need to take a break and let our brains rest. So one of the things I did was a scholarship log. I didn't like to write. My mentor told me, he asked me, he goes, Teri, do you have a learning disability? Because I wrote so bad. And I said, no, I don't have a learning disability. So I started doing this scholarship log because it helped me identify the pebbles. Looky here, did email first. Look how many words I got done, 0. And that was sitting down, working for 30 minutes was the goal for me. Then here I got stuck looking for resources but got 530. Here you start to see a transition. Didn't make this my first duty, only 30 minutes, but got 224 words. Then I got 608, finished draft, wrote 932 words in 60 minutes. Yay. So it helped identify what my pebbles were and how they were impacting the outcomes of what I did. The other thing is I was always told that you should write when you're inspired. I was never inspired. So what came about is looking at if you have an accountability partner. So I had a MEDED portal submission that I was supposed to have done at the end of January. I wasn't getting it done. So I called up one of my collaborators and said, I need you to be my accountability partner. And what that means is I want to set a meeting with you, telephone call, because I don't want to disappoint you. And I know I'll likely write. It took me 3 times, but by golly, I stayed up till like 1 o'clock because I couldn't disappoint her the 3rd time. But I knew that that was the only way I was going to get that written because I needed that accountability. And you write more if you have accountability. The other is pages per day if you're forced to write. So sometimes it's just good to just sit and put something down on paper because you're going to write more if you do that. These are just some tips for scholarship. Start small. I literally block off time. So my colleagues know that it's usually my work from home day. I try to do that twice a month, and that's usually the days I'm working on scholarship. I don't have to drive into Houston, so that saves me 2 hours a day. And as Sarah says, if I don't fix my hair, it's another hour. So that's 3 hours I get extra to work on scholarship. The other is, if you don't like writing, then dictate. The other thing that was so helpful for me is doing it with a partner. So we had a group of 4 that worked on that book. I could have never done it on my own. It was too daunting. But having someone else, and we actually had fun. We went to their house, we would write at their house, then we'd go kayak and do something else. And it's much better if you can do it with someone else. Plus, it's the scholarship's a gift. And you can keep giving different pieces of it, just like what I talked about. Everybody took a different piece of that scholarship in the beginning. Someone had the book, someone had the code cards, someone took the grant. So we got a whole lot of stuff out of one project. So there's a lot of different tips, and knowing that we're coming close to time, what I'd like you to do is I want to close on two things. One is this picture. I'm a developmental pediatrician. And scholarship isn't something that you're going to do overnight and turn in something and it's automatically going to get accepted. I think this is one of the hardest things for young scholars to recognize is they work really hard, they're in the literature, they do this great work, and then it's rejected. Scholarship is about planning, publishing, but most important, it's about persevering. It's about when people take what you love and rip it to shreds, going, how can I make it better? And then turning around and turning it into the next person. So you have to have an action. We'll work for food, we'll work for food. It's just not enough to show up. You gotta have a business plan. So since I'm a physician, I give prescriptions. So on your table, you have a scholarship prescription. You also have a writing contract. But please think about what you're going to do. One activity, some 2 to 3 steps that you can do, 2 to 3 people that could be a part of your scholarship project or your support community. There's also a writing contract on the back. I would encourage you not just to fill it out, but to give it to somebody, to hold yourself accountable. Because that's one of the things that helps us get things done. So again, I want to thank you all for being here, hearing about this. Another passion of mine is communication. My clinical expertise is in health literacy. It actually is education, and how do we help educate patients? So one of the things, you have a gold card. That was supported by a grant from the Gold Humanism Foundation, and again, it's about tips for communication. I've got 3 hard copy books up here. They're all online and they're all free, but you're welcome to have those. But I do want to thank you all for listening, and most importantly, take that scholarship prescription and take something that you're doing and transform it into scholarship. So thank you guys. I had a great time.